All righty. Cool beans. We'll go ahead and get started. You know, I guess I'm just a geek for profit. I really do love talking about money because I get excited about this stuff. So just to give you guys thank you guys for being here, by the way. Like I said, I get excited about this stuff, but I know that not everybody necessarily feels the way that I do, which is fine. I want to give you guys a little preview. So, as I mentioned, we're going to be going through this book, The Psychology of Money. And we're also going to be talking through the Profit First book. So last week we talked about chapter 1 and chapter 2 in The Psychology of Money. And this week we're going to be talking through chapters 10 and 11. I'll give you guys a little preview. Next week, we're actually going to jump to Profit First. So we're going to kind of be going back and forth, okay? But for this week, The Psychology of Money, chapter 10 and 11. Save Money is chapter 10, is the title of that one is Save Money, and chapter 11 is Reasonable is Greater than Rational. Reasonable is greater than rational. Let's see. Here we go. Something good. Tell me something good. So anything good with respect to profit over the last week? You guys got any good news to share about? Because ultimately, I do want to say this. I don't want this, to be as James Shaw would say, infotainment, right? We ultimately, we want to take whatever good we get out of our conversations and put it into practice. And, hopefully we see some good things that come out of that. But so we may not have anything, but if you have anything, any good, anything that maybe you observed coming out of, our time together last week or coming into this week based on the stuff that you read, anything good that you want to share? Anybody? All right.
No, but I enjoy the book. I think you just were saying that this is a good book. Yeah. It's easy to read, how to break it down.
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to paying attention to what I do. I'm actually taking notes as I'm reading. Yeah. Because I don't have my highlight.
That's good stuff.
Actual book, but I actually like that.
So you're asking anything to share as in profit as relative to what? As in general, or referral, or reference towards real estate?
No. This is not, of course, no, it doesn't have to be real estate specific. Okay. It's just relative to profit and really, and we'll talk about this today, really is beyond profit. We're going to get into really wealth. And because at the end of the day, it's about net worth in my mind, anyhow, how I look at things.
So I did look at, I'm not sure if this is related, but I follow trends of the market a lot. I look at short and long-term investments. Long-term more for building equity, and as far as building wealth. So I had invested in the energy fund for me, and then I also got my daughter involved probably about a year ago, because what I see is good companies and funds that are down over a period of time, and then I go in and look at the technical analysis, and if the stocks have like a 1-year low or something like that for the funds, then I go in and buy. I'm also noticing that they pay out dividends. But anyway, to make a long story short, we bought in, I started following this company and I bought in at $9 a share, this energy company. And as of today, they're running 55 a share.
There you go.
So as far as profit, I'm looking at,
That's
you know, over 400% profit
that's a,
within a year's time. And the company, the stock is still going up.
there you go.
So I'm now looking at, okay, now, you know, I'm continuing to buy more shares of it.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of great points that we could delve into with that. I appreciate you sharing that. I love the fact that one, that you're in the market, two, that you got your daughter involved, you know, three, that you said that you're, you know, investing more in what you see as a winning option. So I love that because, you know, my experience has been that winners tend to win, and, you know, investing more in your winners generally is a good strategy. So I appreciate you sharing. You know, again, so today as we're laying the groundwork, laying the foundation in chapter 10, you know, where it talks about money and saving money. I won't go past these here. Save money. Let me here we go. Let me minimize this thing. Hold on for a second. I don't know why I can't see my. I can't see my person. There we go. So this quote right here, building wealth has little to do with your income or investment returns and lots to do with your savings rate. So what do you think of when you read that? Like, what's your like initial response to that quote? Building wealth has little to do with your income or investment returns and lots to do with your savings rate. Is that, yeah, what's your response to that? What are your initial thoughts when you read that?
The more you save, and you have money, because people think if they don't have the money, then they can't really save. So you start saving, the longer you save, then to me, it means you can be wealthy, you can have a whole lot of money, but if you don't save it, you're just really building for nothing. There's no rate of saving, or you're saving, not saving in the right places. If you put it in a bank, okay, but if you put it in an investment, that's a different type of saving. So to me, there's different levels of saving.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Art?
To me, when I think about that, I think what you're doing is, there's two things when it comes to that. One is living below your means, so you can actually save more money. And then the other is accumulated savings. Some people say 20%. I've heard actually try to save 50% of your money. That way you can start building your wealth, not just living payday to payday.
Mm-hmm.
Take as much as you can and save that money aside, and then look as far as investing, whether it be conservative or high risk, something where you're going to get a return.
Yeah.
Accumulate more savings.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I appreciate what you guys shared. I mean, I think you're all touching on it. I mean, and I'm to be honest with you, I'm the kind of person that, like, for example, you just touched on, you know, hey, was it, you save 20%, you save 50%, and we can talk, and I like to start, I'm a very conceptual person, so I like to start at the highest level, because what I found is that, you know, just about anything we talk to is like I forget her name. What's her name? What's the lady who presented the financial?
Yes, I think it is Patricia.
Patricia.
Mm-hmm. Patricia Hayes or Hines.
Yeah. So she presented to us, she's talking about financial strategies or whatever, and different things. And what I found is that you can get into nth levels of degrees of detail on just about anything that you touch. And it's not like there's not enough information on all the details and all the things. But I think what I found mostly what's missing is the big picture. It's like all the pieces are on the table, but sometimes we have a hard time putting the pieces together. And to me, I like to break it down into the, simple terms, right? And so like when I read something like this, it's like, wow, your savings rate has everything to do with building wealth. Because you can have a high income, which means you got a lot of money coming in. You can have great investments, which means you got great returns, right? But at the end of the day, if you're not saving, and I use savings, I think in the broadest terms, right? Savings just means not spending, right? Not necessarily savings meaning you put it in Bank of America and let it sit in a savings account or a checking account or something like that. But if you're not saving, and you touched on it, Art, living below your means, you'll never build wealth. You could say, I heard Shaquille O'Neal, he had an interview one time and he was talking about a fellow, I forget who he was, somebody he was talking to, said, the difference between you and I, said, you're rich. He said, but I'm wealthy. He said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, he said, you have a lot of money coming in. He said, but I have assets. And that was, and for Shaquille O'Neal, it was like a light bulb going off. It was like, because a lot of money coming in, and if you got a lot of money going out, at the end of the day, you don't really have wealth. And we're gonna talk through that. So this is my very simple, again, I like to think about things in simple terms. So from a business perspective, we got business profit, right? Which is the revenue of the business minus whatever we spend on the business, right? Is whatever we have, if you have a surplus, that's gonna be your business profit. Now, what you do with that business profit, part of the business profit you retain. Now, don't get caught up in the accounting terminology, but basically what you retain to run the business out of that business profit, some of that goes into that. Some of the business profit goes into what I call your personal revenue to run your life, right? So we have a business where we have income coming in, right? We're selling houses, we're doing what we're doing, we got money coming in, or whatever our business is, we got revenue coming in, we're spending money to generate that. Whatever the surplus is, that's our profit. Then what we do with the profit is part of it we keep to keep running the business or grow the business. The other goes to our, for our personal use to run our life. Now, then what happens is we have our personal revenue, right? And then we have whatever our living expenses are, right? And the difference between those is our personal profit. Now, out of our personal profit, what can happen is some of that can go back into living expenses to increase our living expense, more living, I call it, right? We can up our living expenses because I got, hey, I can take that money and put it back and I can get a bigger house, another house, I can get a bigger car, another car, I can eat at fine restaurants every night, whatever it is. Or I can take out of the personal profits, some of that can be cash savings, and some of that can go into other assets, right? Those assets being stocks, bonds, real estate, or business. And when your cash savings and your assets are greater than your living expenses, that's wealth. Now again, this is me talking, right? So from my perspective, if you have cash savings and assets that are greater than 1 month of your living expenses, you're welcome. You have assets, you have savings, you have assets that can cover you for 1 month. You can cover your living expenses for 1 month. A lot of people don't have that, right? So that's a degree of wealth. And you can say, okay, that's an entry level of wealth. I can cover myself for a month. Now, the more months, the more savings you have, the more assets you have that exceed your living expenses for a longer and longer and longer period of time, then the greater your wealth, right? So, and when I look at things like this, there's a couple of things that come into play. Again, remember we started out with, we said it has to do with your savings rate. Now, what we have to realize is that this is one of our greatest foes when it comes to increasing our savings rate, is consumerism. We're bombarded every day from every brand. I mean, that's just a whole bunch of stuff, right? Everybody's trying to get us to do what? Spend money. There's unlimited ways to spend money, right? More entertainment. I can eat better. I can eat more often. I can eat out, whatever. I mean, all those decisions that we make every day has everything to do with our savings rate. So I'll give you just a personal example, and I think I shared with you guys whatever last time about how, when I first came to Atlanta, when my daughter was going to high school, and made a decision for her to go to private school, and got hit with the reality that I was going to have to actually pay for it. And what a shock that was, right? But the realization that, hey, I can pay for that. What it meant was that there were other things that if I was going to pay for her to go to school, and if I wasn't going to go into a bunch of debt, then there was other things that I couldn't do. So I had to consciously make a decision to limit my consumption of things like new furniture, things like a new car. So I remember driving around. Here I am. I'm a financial analyst. Making again enough for my daughter to be able to go to private school, but I wasn't driving a fancy car. I was driving. I think I had at one point I was driving like a Toyota Corolla or something, right? And so I had all these people on my job. They're pulling out the parking lots and the Benzes and the Beamers and the Lexuses and and so there were those days where I'd be coming out of the parking lot. Right?
And it's hard not to get caught up in things, that everybody else has.
Yeah.
And you feel you should be.
It's real.
Your situation dictates where you need to be right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is so funny. I had people who, just people who knew me, whatever, was like their expectations of what I should be doing or what I should have and what, it's just crazy. You have all these things around you that is basically, it's a force to consume more. And so I remember and sometimes it would be like a struggle to not just go and get because I could have I could have got a loan, I could have whatever, right? But I didn't, I was I was like, I didn't want to do that. I was paying off school loans and, I made a decision that I was going to do that. I'm one of them people that I paid off my student loans. And, but it was decisions that I made. All right. So it's like, I'm going to do this, which means that I'm not going to do these other things. Right. So maybe I didn't go on vacation, whatever. I went home to mama's house, and so, but again, those were decisions I made now. But that's what happens. You got to realize that we're bombarded every day to spend. And again, these are other influences in our lives that can, not maliciously, but just, family, social media now, which that wasn't really a factor back, what I was talking about. Now it is much more so. You're seeing seeing people on social media and this and that, and and those things affect us. Neighbors, you see what neighbors are doing, what they have, whatever, and that could impact us. I love the commercial. There's this commercial, I forget what commercial it is. There's a guy, he's on his ride lawnmower at a nice little house in a suburb somewhere, got a nice lawn, and he's cutting the lawn, and he's smiling, and they show all the neighbors, and there's little nice scene, whatever, and he's kind of like under his breath is like, somebody help me, like I'm in the debt up to my neck, But he's smiling and looking good, but he's dying, right? Co-workers. So you have all these different things that, you can see, like, I'll give you an example. It's not, again, Keisha. Last year, Keisha, she had a great year, whatever. And Terrell posted the thing with Keisha, she bought a Porsche. Mm-hmm. And so you can look at that from the outside and be like, man, I want a Porsche, right? Or I want this, or whatever it is that you want. But you're looking at somebody else. But like, with no real understanding of what that person's real situation is, what their financial standing is, whatever, we can make emotional decisions to, just based on outside things that we see that can influence us to go and, do things. I still, to this day, it's like I was telling my wife, like right now, everybody in my house has a car. But my two sons and my wife have cars. I'm the only one that don't have a vehicle. Although I paid for them, but anyhow. But I don't have, so I'm like hopping between cars and stuff. And I'm like, is this so I can go and get a car. But I told my wife, I said, the car that I really want, I'm like, if I just was it irrational, my irrational decision, my emotional decision, I would go and buy a car that I really shouldn't be buying right now, right?
You know what though, all the things that you're saying, it really goes back to the point in the book where it says the person who believes to save more is in their control more than they think. And it's based on humility and not caring what other people think about that.
Absolutely.
Because you gotta do what you need to do.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. So it's so the fact that, for example, the fact that I had a plan to pay off debt, that helped keep me between the lines in terms of not going and do something crazy, because I'm trying to get out of debt. I'm not going to go get into more debt. And it's like, and not worried about, hey, who's got the pretty car or whatever. It's like, I know that I can maintain my household. I know where I'm going, whatever, and don't, not worry about the outside appearances.
It's kind of like my motor had went out of my car. My car is paid for, and it was going to cost me about $3,600 to get another motor put in my vehicle. But I had people saying to me, well, why you just think about getting a new car? And I'm like, how much sense would that make? For me to go get into debt and get a new vehicle, because I'm gonna go get something and pay a car note most likely, because other than that, I might as well just fix my, if I get another used car, then I might as well fix my used car.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna have to figure out what's wrong with that vehicle. So go and spend more than $3,500. I'm not gonna be able to go get another car for $3,500. So to me, it made more sense to do it that way. But I have a lot of people like, why don't you just get a new car?
That's always a tough debate, because you're in a situation, your car is paid off. But a lot of people are in a situation where they have a used car that's not paid off. And now every time they turn around, it's breaking down. And now you're issuing out more and more money. And the car keeps breaking down. So sometimes you have to look at
the cost of maintenance.
the cost of maintenance. And if you rather just get rid of your car, make the payment, and have a peace of mind, where you have something to do with the warranty or deal with that car, get it fixed. And hopefully nothing happen to it again.
Right, and if I had been a car that had been giving me problems, I've had this car since I bought it. I bought it brand new, never had any issues with this car until this. So I was just like, to me, like right now, it would make more sense financially for me to just go ahead and put the motor in and see what, because I haven't had, never had a problem. And it's paid for.
Yeah.
But going about what you were saying earlier, I had a talk with a good friend of mine, and he was telling me that, there's a young lady that he was interested in dating, and he said, in Cleveland where I grew up, he'll go over somebody's house, and they'll have a nice house and a nice car, and they're going out a lot, everything looks good on the outside, but then he said with time's up, well, that person has like 150,000 school debt, they're living paycheck to paycheck, not much in savings. Well, all this stuff looks good, and you roll up these nice cars and nice homes, but then you just never know, what's going on.
Absolutely.
On the inside.
You can't go there.
Compare other people's outsides to
your inside. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so this is what I call my 3 keys to wealth, right? So this is just, wealth is the accumulated leftovers after you spend what you take in. It's accumulated, right, over time. You have to have, to your point about living below your means, you got to have some leftovers. If you're consuming everything, there's nothing left over, and there's no wealth to build, right? The other thing is, wealth is specific to your unique needs and desires. There's no dollar amount, there's nothing that defines here's wealth, right? It's just like that little equation that I used, right? When your cash savings and your assets are greater than your living expenses. Now you get to choose what your living expenses are, right? So, again, and I'm not, this is, so again, for me, for example, when I tell people, it's like, hey, I left for a corporate job at 45 or whatever, and really didn't have any outside income except for my investments until, last year, right? And again, I'm just saying, I mean, and look, I look at it as I've been extremely blessed to be able to do that. So I call it, it's kind of like a midterm semi-retirement, a midterm retirement, right? To survive, if you will, for basically 14, 15 years off investments and not have a job is, but at the same time, my lifestyle, I've always lived below my means. When I had a really nice income coming in, I always lived, but I could have bought a much, bigger house in a different place and a higher, and this and that, and the cars. When I got beyond all the stuff, even when my daughter was going to school and all that, I never did. So that afforded me the opportunity, which is one of the things they talk about in the book, which is time and flexibility. when you have wealth, when you have the resources that exceed your living expenses, and you get to choose. And, you know, that for me was one of the things, and I'm not, you know, just because I was exposed to certain things, it wasn't necessarily, of course, you know, I grew up very modestly, not by choice, not by choice, just by circumstance. But, you know, when I started working corporately, I always had the mentality of, I never want to have those golden handcuffs on me where, oh, I gotta stay here because I'm up to here in debt. And, you know, so again, it's choices that you make, you know. So we, like you said, in the book, it says that, you know, we're much more in control. And I love the fact that it says that, is that, you know, when you think about that quote that says wealth is really more dependent on our savings rate than it is our income, or, you know, hey, you might be a better investor than me. You might be getting, you know, 15% return on your money every year, and I'm only getting 8%. But if you're getting 15% return on your money and you're spending, you know, 14, and I'm getting 8%, but I'm, you know, only spending 3. In the long run, I mean, and if my, you know, my living based on my living, I'm going to be in a better position. I'm like, hey, you be that person who, whenever has to do certain things, and, you know, if you're saving, again, and it gets back to the ego, right, which is the third point. Wealth is directly related to the gap between your income and your ego.
That's true. That is so true. Because your ego makes you buy everything.
That's exactly right. It really does. And we all have it. We all got the ego. You know, and so it's not, you know, there's no judgment. It's just reality of, you know, what it is. And to the extent that we can get control of that, be aware of it, first of all, and get control of it, you know, there's no way around it. It's a fact. You never build wealth if you don't have savings, right? In that broad sense, savings, investments, whatever.
But also too, in that same area where it says here that the most powerful way to increase savings is not to increase your income.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It says that one of the most powerful ways to increase your savings isn't to raise your income, but it's to raise your humility.
Raise your level of humility. And therefore your savings.
Mm-hmm. Because then you're not out there consuming everything.
That's exactly right.
Super consumer.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, social media, everything, hey, live your best life. Do this, do that, you know, travel, do, you know, I mean, it's relentless.
But also too, I think it's in knowing who you are personally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if you're not trying to be like everybody else, it's cool. But if you don't know who you are, you want to be everybody else.
Right.
And you don't know what's going on, like you said, it's somebody's house.
Right.
All you see is the front door. You're not going in.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what there's a book, I don't know if you've read this book called The Millionaire Next Door, which is a great book because it talks about the majority of the millionaires in this country are hardworking people, whatever, who live very modestly, and you wouldn't know it by looking at them. The majority of them, you're not going to see them coming. They got the assets and they got the whatever, but you know, a lot of times we associate wealth with the flashy and what we see out in, you know, and there are some people who are just outrageously, you know, they got a lot of money or whatever, and hey, that's, you know, but that's not the
How you do it.
that is the extreme case.
Right.
The majority of people who are millionaires, who are, you know, not just real, but who are wealth. When I say millionaires, I mean they have wealth, they have assets. You don't see them. They drive modest vehicles. I had a guy when I was working at Coke, who was he was the president of a division, and he drove I forget what kind of van. It's some kind of little funky little van, right? Is what he drove to work. And so I remember one day he was telling me, he said, "Yeah, Joe," he said, "you know, you see this, whatever, you know," he was like kind of joking about his car. But he was telling me, "Yeah, I got a blah, blah, blah." I forget what kind of vehicle he told me he had at home. You know, he did have like a high-end vehicle, whatever. But his everyday car, I mean, just.
Because it ends up not matter, because it's just money, you know what I mean? And people who have money, they talk about money freely because it does not define who they are as a person. To me, it's the job that you chose to have and just create the money to get. You know, that's what you chose to do.
Yeah. That's funny because just saying, I have, Sherry knows, I had a friend named Anderson, who's an anesthesiologist, who lived out in California. In fact, there's two of them, and he would drive this old beat up Toyota to work every day. His car was just beat, and he wouldn't hardly let anybody over his house. And I was one of the very few people who let over his house. But when you go to his house, it's gated,
Right.
Huge house. And come to find out, his background, not just the money he made from doing anesthesia, but his parents. His grandparents were one of the very few people that owned slaves of a black family in Louisiana, and they had owned the whole county. So just from one of his inheritance, he was worth over $70 million. But you would never know it if you knew him, even personally. You would never know it until you went to his house and talked to him. But you would just never know. There's a couple of people in California like that you would just never know because they're very humble. You know, and hard working. They wouldn't drive the flashy cars, you know, to work. So on the weekend or something like that, they might take the car out, but you would never know.
And see, it's good to have conversations like this because, look, there's nothing that says you can't have really nice stuff. You can have really nice stuff, but if you're talking about building wealth, you can't get over the fact that you got to have more cash savings and assets greater than your living expenses. If you got really high living expenses, you got super high assets and hey,
you can afford it.
It's all good, right?
You can afford it.
But what happens is, again, most of the time what happens is we're stretching to get to, you know, we're not the other way around. It's like, oh, I can get this because there's no problem. We're stretching to get to this and putting ourselves in a position where, you know, it's going to be almost impossible for us to build wealth. So any what's your, you know, kind of to encapsulate or summarize, we got 12 minutes. We kind of talked about that. Let's go on to reasonable versus rational. Reasonable versus rational. I love this picture right here, right? You got all the equations and the rational and the logic on the side there, and then you got the old bear on the side. Reasonable, he just, and they reference that in the book about being able to sleep at night. Morgenhauser again, he said, do not aim to be coldly rational when making financial decisions. Aim to just be pretty reasonable. Reasonable is more realistic, and you have a better chance of sticking with it for the long run, which is what matters most when managing money. I love this. You know, to me, I relate this as not like, you know, losing weight or dieting and different things. I hear people doing this, you know, talk about doing stuff and I'm gonna do all these, and all those different things may be effective in helping you to lose weight. But the question is, are you gonna stick with it for the long run? And when it comes to managing money, you know, doing things mostly right or well, over the long run is gonna pay off, you know, bigger dividends than, you know, doing it well for a short period of time. It's kind of like the same in our business, right? In real estate, I kind of feel like that. I mean, you don't have to do everything right all the time, but, you know, consistency and, you know, you know, it's about trajectory, you know, trying to get better. I mean, I just look at, you know, I know my experience or whatever. I go back and look and I'm like, man, I did a whole bunch of stuff crazy, you know, but because we're in motion and being consistent with certain things, you know, things worked out, you know, pretty well with you know, what we're doing. So, but I love that decision. And to me, this also, I think it takes the pressure off, because you don't have to be perfect. And I love there was a quote in there about, you're not a machine, right? You're an emotional human, flawed human, you know.
All of the imperfections.
Huh?
With all of the imperfections.
That's right. And just recognizing that and giving yourself grace to, like, you know, look, I don't have to be perfect. What it says right here, yeah. It says the first sentence, you're not a spreadsheet, you're a person, a screwed up emotional person. I love that. Right. And so then, you know, it gives examples, right, of the guy who was, you know, the guy who was treating people for syphilis using malaria, whatever. He was inserting, you know, injecting them with low levels of malaria and creating, causing them to have fevers. And the fever was helping to kill off and he won a Nobel Peace Prize for it, right? Which, honestly, to be honest with you, which it made sense to me when I was reading it. It's like, you know, God created our bodies to be self-sustaining in a way, right? And so he created fever, and fever plays a role in helping to fight off, you know, illnesses and different things that are going on in our bodies. And to read that, you know, it kind of made me think. It was like, right? Because you say you got a fever, the first thing it says, oh, take some aspirin, take this, whatever you do, get rid of the fever. Well, the fever is there to actually help combat what's going on in your body. But fevers don't feel good. And if something's going on with you and you go to the doctor, it's like you expect that the doctor is going to make you feel better. Right? And it feels better if you get rid of the fever, which I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it was. I wrote down some stuff about that.
I thought that was fascinating. Even in the pediatric center or whatever, they were talking about that, how they were, you know, counseling mothers on the fact that, hey, look, you know, a fever between 100 and 104 is actually beneficial for your child. But people freak out if a child has a fever.
Break the fever. No, y'all let it fight. It's fighting.
Right. And that's the rationally, logically, fever is good. But emotionally and the practical side of it is we don't want to feel the discomfort of that. So you got a whole profession, right? That basically is saying, hey, you know, they go with what's reasonable. It's more reasonable for me to treat you for this because people feel better. It's an emotional thing where they feel better because I don't have the fever. So, you know, so again, like you were talking earlier about, you know, somebody, I'm sure you're going to have different philosophies around how much you should save. You might have one person who is like, I'm saving 50% of my income. And they're making decisions to do that, right? again, it's like you made a choice here. That means there's a whole lot of stuff you're saying no to. And amen, it's not a bad choice, but it's your choice. What may be more reasonable for me is 10%, 15%. Now, is it a bigger gap? You know, might I have more savings if I did 50%? Yes. But if that's not reasonable for you, if that's not something that you can sustain, you feel like you can sustain over a long period of time, it's perfectly, in a sense, it's perfectly rational for you to make a decision to say, well, hey, I'm not going to do that much. I'm just going to do this much.
And it's okay to change what you're gonna do.
That's right.
You know, that's how you don't become irrational in the decisions that you make,
That's right.
because then things start to get stupid.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Literally.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense anymore.
And they tell the story in the book of the guy who's like one of the pioneers of modern portfolio theory with respect to investing, right? Which is kind of like has to do with, you know, how you allocate your investments and different things. And I thought it was hilarious when they talked to this guy. He was like, well, let me read it. It was, you know, here's a guy who's coming up with all these theories about, you know, how to invest your money, right? And his response, let me see, I got that here, was, he goes, when they asked him about how he allocated his portfolio, this is the 1950s, he said, I visualized my grief if the stock market went way up and I wasn't in it, or if it went way down and I was completely in it. My intention was to minimize my future regrets. So I split my contributions 50-50 between bonds and equities. Had nothing to do with his theory, right? I think this guy, I think he was a Nobel Peace Prize winner as well. He won a Nobel Peace Prize for his strategy, his theory, but he wasn't even following his own theory because of he's a human being.
He based it on his emotions, how he was
exactly
or here.
That's right. And you know, so it just goes to show that, I mean, that's the reality of it, right? We don't necessarily, you know, do things according to what is, you know, academically, theoretically, the right way. Now, it says later on he adjusted his strategy, right? Right, eventually he adjusted his strategy. But that's fine. I mean, you know, and that's okay, like to your point, you know, we do that. And then I love the other story where it's talking about Jack Bogle, who's the founder of Vanguard and was an early and strong proponent of index investing, right? As opposed to individual stocks and whatever. He's like low cost, passive index, you know, investments. And he was like serious about beating the drums on that. And yet his son became, you know, was like, he was in the industry. And it said here, right? It said, many thought it interesting that his son found a career as an active high fee hedge fund and mutual fund manager. Bogle, the man who said high fee funds violate the humble rules of arithmetic, right? And that has to do with the fact that when you're paying somebody to manage your money and they're charging you a high fee to do it, it's like the returns that you need on the investments to offset the fees that they're charging you, like it's like long-term, it doesn't make sense. But he said he invested some of his own money in his son's fund. He said, what's the explanation? And Bogle said, we do some things for family reasons. He told the Wall Street Journal. He said, if it's not consistent, well, life isn't always consistent. Right? And again, So again, this is just to give us perspective into, you know, to me, that's how I look at it. It's like, man, at the end of the day, it's not about doing everything quote unquote right, but you know, we got to be reasonable, and we have to be, you know, like I always say, I tell people with respect to investing, whatever, you got to be in the game, right?
You can't win if you're not in the game.
You got to be in the game.
You're gonna be a spectator or a player.
Right.
One or the other.
And it's like, so it's like right now, I kind of have, you know, I've talked to my sons, whatever, they hear me talk about investing, and I've talked to them about different things. And so they, you know, they're doing their investing at their, I got some friends, I got a bunch of people, guys around me, whatever, that I've introduced to investing and doing different things. And they're doing it at a certain level. And I'm like, okay, great, right? You don't have to do it at the level that the next person's doing it at. Do it at the level that you're at. But as you're, because it really doesn't matter. If you're paying attention, you can learn valuable lessons, whether you invested $5 or $5,000 or $500,000. You can still learn some valuable lessons. And that's the thing about it is, when you're in the game, you're more likely to learn and to gain the perspective that you really need to be able to do things that's really going to matter and you know, produce the results that you want long term. So yeah. So any thoughts before, as we look to close out today's session? Any, you know, what do you, so let me ask this. So what do you walk away with from today and our discussions today, you know, that either reinforces what you were thinking, or it's like, you know, a tweak that you feel like, hey, going forward, this is maybe something that I need to tweak? What are your thoughts on that? Hmm? That's all right. I mean, just, you know, just what do you, you know, for your personal use?
A lot of times, savings can be an irrational thing, you know, based on what you make, based on what you're supposed to, what you want to make, you know what I mean? Like I told you before, I did everything cash. So because I did everything cash, I didn't put nothing in savings. So which way am I gonna be? You know what I mean? I need to be more rational. I need to just, I don't even know how to explain. I need to live within my means, you know, based on where I'm at today. Not what I can get because I don't expect that, you know, so just staying where I'm at. That's this makes sense to me, especially with the reading of Save Money.
Mm-hmm.
That's my, and also too, it gives you flexibility when you save money. Because then, if you have that flexibility, if something happens, you have some money saved. As opposed to trying to spend. That was valuable. That part where it was like saving without spending. A spending goal gives you options and flexibility, the ability to wait, and the opportunity to pass. And give you time to think, and it lets you change course on your own terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things we didn't, one of the things, and you know, one of the things we didn't talk about, and you just brought it up, is that it's good to save when you have a specific goal, but you really don't need a specific goal to save, because it's not a matter of if an unexpected expense is going to come up, but when. It's just life. I mean, it's going to happen. You're going to have something that's going to happen that, you know, again, it could be a shift in your business. It could be 2008, had nothing to do, you could be doing everything, you know, right, and external factors happen that affects your business and your income, and You know, it's like, man, I wasn't ready. No, you weren't, nobody predict, you weren't gonna predict that. You couldn't look out 5 years ahead and say, oh, that's gonna happen, I better start saving now.
Right.
You save for the unknown, right?
Yeah.
So, absolutely. And I will say this, that I'm telling it's a simple thing, but it's very powerful, is that having a goal, it's like, it is just, yeah, again, man, we're weird. But when my wife and I were paying off debt, right? And we were tracking it. We knew how much we owed, and we literally did, before I don't even know if it was called, I don't think we knew the term snowball effect or whatever, but it was like, we basically started paying off stuff and then rolling that into the next thing and paying it off. And we were tracking it. And like I would get, I might get a bonus or whatever at work. And we were getting excited about tracking the numbers going down, right? And knowing that, man, okay, we're getting there. We're gonna pay this stuff off. And so it's like, I think having goals and having things that helps. It helps you to make decisions and because then it's not so much about, we were excited about achieving this. You're not gonna get excited about, oh, I'm not doing this. You know what I'm saying? Nobody gets excited about, oh, I'm not going to Myrtle Beach on vacation. That's not exciting, that's not motivating. But the fact that I'm focused on, man, I'm paying off my debt, and that was what I was, and that was like an achievement. Then the other stuff that I wasn't doing, it wasn't as much of a factor there. The other thing, one of the things we're talking, and like I said, I kind of mentioned this as we're talking about profit, and we're talking about now businesses. Obviously, you want to have profit. Ultimately, from my perspective, particularly when you're talking about wealth, it's about net worth, and net worth ultimately is the accumulation of those profits and the building of assets and savings and all that. And when you start tracking net worth, like, it's like anything, the thing that you focus on expands. So when you start focusing on it, and it's like, if I'm really focused on building my net worth, and I get excited about the fact that, hey, my net worth is here, and now, man, I see the trajectory, and I'm increasing, and I got, it's like where I want to go. Then that's the motivating factor, and it helps you when you're making decisions about, because again, for my net worth to go up, either I'm maintaining the same level of, my living lifestyle, whatever, is the same, and my income is increasing, right? And that's the gap. It's like I maintain the level, or again, but what happens is that usually what happens as income starts increasing, there's a whole bunch of different things that I can, myriad, right? Endless number of things that I can spend on. And if I'm not focused on my net worth increasing, then I can easily spend it. And once I spend it, it's not available, and therefore net worth doesn't increase. So, all right, that's it for this. So we're going to do this. Chapter 1 in Profit First for next time, for next week. I was going to do 2 chapters, but I don't want to overwhelm it. So it's probably 50 pages. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to do chapter 1 for next week.
Yeah, we don't read 2 chapters and it wasn't that long.
Yeah, I know. So that's why. This is a long-term thing, so we're going to, build it up. But this is good. So Profit First is going to get into, there's chapter 1 is a little bit of a setup still, but Profit First is really going to get into some specifics about how we manage our business, how we approach profit from a business perspective. And it gets us in some specifics about, you know, how we account for it. So this is going to be, this book gets into more details in terms of some specific things to do to get at profit in the businesses. So, and it's not, I mean, this is not it's not a real estate specific book. So it's applicable across the spectrum.
So chapter 1.
Chapter 1.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Well, thank you. All right. Thanks for coming by.
So do you want to get anything?
Did you say it?
Yeah, you stay here, ready to get the things for my open house and talk to them.
Yeah, she's over there. She's on the bus right now.
Oh, what time is,